Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today, focusing on harnessing the power of Symantec Endpoint Protection 14. We've got today's webinar broken into two parts. I'm going to start off with a strategic look at the battle for the endpoint, a lot of the noise that's going on around all the various players that are trying to provide you a solution to protecting your endpoints. And I'm going to turn it over to Scott Hardy, who's going to talk specifically about the new features within Step 14 and how you can leverage those to win the battle. So to start off, just a real quick intro on myself. As mentioned, this is John Bisco. I'm the EVP of Security Strategy for CBI. I've been here a little over 2 years. Prior to that, I was the Chief Information Security Officer for a bank headquartered here in the Detroit area. CBI is a IT risk management company, about 25 years old. We are headquartered in Detroit, Michigan. We are a services-led organization providing advisory services, implementation services, and we are a partner of Symantec as well. So the battle for the endpoint. As I was thinking about this and thinking about my inbox and the clutter that seems to come into my inbox every day from the various vendors who are trying to convince me that they've got the next greatest security solution to protect the endpoint, I thought back to around, I think it was 2014. There was a rather significant article in the Wall Street Journal that got a lot of press for a couple different reasons. The article was written about Symantec developing additional functionality and looking at additional ways to protect companies from the new and emerging cyber threats back in 2014. But what the article author took away from it was a one-line kind of headline that antivirus is dead. And that got picked up on by Brian Krebs and some of the other cybersecurity journalists, and it was really focused on from two different perspectives. The folks that just read the headline thought that Symantec was leaving their core product set and then moving away from antivirus, which was completely wrong. The true focus of the article, if you really dug in deep to it, was that focusing on purely reactive, purely preventative technologies to be your sole control was just the wrong way of going about protecting your endpoint. The threats were changing, the cyber landscape was evolving, and we really needed to stop looking at antivirus as the be-all or end-all or the only control that we need to have in place. I remember back to my early days as a security manager, there were really two components to my job function. Number one, run antivirus on the endpoint. No one was going to get fired if they were running a leading antivirus solution on their endpoint. But hand in hand with that, number two responsibility of my job was don't impact the performance of the endpoint. And that was a real battle because as new threats came out, as new preventative techniques came out, the finger kept getting pointed back to security that your agents, your endpoint stuff was slowing down that device. And so the conflict that occurred within the IT organization was, do we leave all of these features on and protect our endpoint, or do we strip away some of those features and really degrade the power and the capability of the security solution, but keep our users happy, keep the perception that was what was slowing it down. It really was perception. Through many of my own tests in our own labs, those early products weren't really the culprit that was slowing down the endpoint. All of this gave really a false sense of security when you're relying on just one control, when you're looking at the arms race that was going on between the malware authors and the signature writers. It was an arms race to see who could write more signatures in any particular time period, week, month, quarter, whatever it was. And it's really opened the door to this new wave of supposed competition around next-gen AV. What I really want to focus on, though, is when you're thinking about how to protect the endpoint, there's two things that we should be focusing on. One, how can we increase the time that it takes for our adversaries to breach or to compromise us? And two, how can we decrease the time that it takes for us to detect and to respond? As mentioned before, the old way of thinking was we are going to be 100% successful in keeping our adversaries out. We're going to be 100% successful in keeping our insider threats in line and in check. And that just isn't reality any longer. So increasing that time to compromise, or increasing the complexity by which it takes to get into our organizations is our new number one goal. Number two is how can we decrease that time to detect and respond? When bad things happen, when we miss a configuration, when a user clicks on something that they weren't supposed to, how can we detect that faster and respond quicker? To do that, we talk about, when we're doing advisory services, we talk about an adaptive approach to security, an adaptive framework. And there really are four pieces to it. It is a cyclical response where you're constantly improving on your overall security position. We start with prepare. Some of these things we can do. We recommend doing all of them. But when you're in the prepare phase, you really want to look at hardening your systems. You want to take advantage of your gateway security, filtering and blocking at the gateway. Network zoning is a concept that's been around for a little while. We're just now starting to see more and more traction with it. Doing a risk analysis of your business and moving and separating different lines of business from each other with network zones. Putting more risky users or more risky business functions in an isolated manner. PCI was really one of the early drivers towards this zoning concept of moving all of your PCI assets into its own network zone. And then having a good baseline, whether it's baseline for the servers, baseline for your endpoints, you really need to have those in place. When we get around to detect and respond, if you don't have a baseline, you don't know what's changed. I was having a conversation with a company that just sold the data recorders, and they told me that this is the only thing that you need. You need to have something that can record what's going on on your environment, and look to that when something changes. And I said, well, what happens if a client doesn't have a good baseline? If they don't know what normal looks like, your solution by itself isn't going to be enough to keep them protected. On the prevention side, signatures still work. I giggle a little bit when people try to tell me that signatures are dead and there's no reason to use them anymore. Why would you stop doing something that's working? I agree that it shouldn't be your only control, but it's like a funnel. And if you can kill the malware with the low-hanging fruit malware with signatures, do it, and then move down that funnel if it gets past the signature because it is automorphing, or if it's something that hasn't been written yet, then we hit it with exploit mitigation, or we hit it with reputation. But let's build a funnel where we're killing the low-hanging fruit early, and we're just requiring our agents, our endpoint solutions to really focus on that stuff that's getting past the signatures. I think Scott's going to talk about that more in depth. So that really is where we talk about increasing the time it takes to get in by having that layered approach. On the decreasing the time to detect and increasing our time to respond. On the detect side, let's automate as much as we can. Sorry, I've got this slide flipped around a little bit. On the detect side, let's talk about process behavior. Let's talk about machine learning. Let's talk about emulators. Let's talk about ways that we can provide a risk score to the unknown. Let's identify changes that look to be different from normal operations, and instead of trying to automatically block that, which really just leads to increased false positives, let's empower our SOC, let's empower our security analysts with more information about that process, more information about what happened when we detonated that file that we hadn't seen before. If it's getting past all the prevent capabilities, let's detonate that in an emulator and provide back to that analyst information about it. Let's provide them back with SIM and search capabilities. Again, I think the flight data recorder is fantastic functionality. It needs to be there, but it's more in a threat hunting mechanism rather than a single control around being able to find what changed. Once you've detected that you've got a problem, you need to have the ability to go and find other cases where that may have happened. On the response side, and again, I apologize that we got our headers there flipped around. On the response side, let's respond in an automated fashion the best we can. If that means automatically remediating, let's do it. If it means automatically isolating it, let's make sure that we're picking solutions that can integrate with other network controls and move an endpoint to a quarantine state or isolate it away from the rest of our environment. Let's look for solutions that can integrate with our gateway solutions. So if we know that a command and control is operating on a certain IP IP address out on the internet, let's automatically block that at the gateway so that further infections aren't successful in talking with the command and control infrastructure. All in all, this 4-point approach, this adaptive framework for security needs to be in place. All 4 pieces need to be there, and we really do need to move away from a strictly preventative approach. How are you going to do this? How are you going to run all these advanced features? How are you going to be able to maintain and keep all of those features on? As I mentioned, I think some of these capabilities have been around in our endpoint solutions for a while now, but they were stripped out. They were removed in that balancing act of trying to not impact the endpoint and still maintain security. CBI offers a managed SEP offering where we will take control and we will manage your endpoint infrastructure for you. It'll still run within your environment. It still is completely available on your own hardware, on your own networks, so you don't have to expose any of that out to a third party. But we'll make sure that it's running as fast as it's designed to. We'll make sure that your features are all turned on. We'll make sure that when something is detected, we've put together a good RACI and a good incident response plan to make sure that we are remediating and cleaning the devices that we can, isolating where it's appropriate, and invoking your full-on incident response program if that's the necessary step that has to happen. More information about our managed SEP offerings can be found at the end of the presentation. We'll also have an email address of where you can get more information about that. So just to sum up my portion here before I turn it over to Scott, singular focus controls truly are dead. They have been for a while, and we really need to look at how we're increasing that time to infect or increasing that time to compromise, making it more difficult for our adversary, force them to go through multiple hoops, multiple ways of detecting and blocking. And then on our side, how are we decreasing that time to detect? How are we making sure that we've got all the information necessary to us to identify suspicious activities, get us the data to our analysts as fast as possible, and empowering them with a response program to take action. Again, and this is nothing new, there's no silver bullets there. And then, how can you leverage a partner to find that right balance between managing the risk and providing exceptional performance on the endpoint? There is unfortunately, the best photo that marketing could find of me. It's not all that great, but this is how you can follow with me for further questions on the email, the Twitter, LinkedIn, and then our blog, where we're often talking about these topics and others. And with that, I will turn it over to Scott for his portion of the deep dive into SEP itself.
Thanks, John. So I'm Scott Hardy. I'm a Senior Principal Solution Sales Engineer here at Symantec. I cover large enterprise from some of our biggest automotive manufacturing customers in the world. We've got a lot of content to cover today. I certainly want to make mention. I'm not going to be able to cover everything I would love to within a short amount of time, but I'm going to hit the main points here. So with Symantec Endpoint Protection 14, we're pretty happy, pretty excited about this release of the product. One thing I don't think we're really good at is marketing, right? So with SEP 14, we've got a lot of new features and functionality that we're building upon SEP 12. We'll talk a little bit about that today. John had talked about a funnel approach, right? So AV, although I don't think it's going to be something that's going to obviously protect our customers, it's still going to be one of the many layers within the SEP product for quick detection of those lower level threats. What I've been trying to hit home with our customers is making sure not only are they using the existing SEP 12 stack to its full potential, that we're also going to focus on using some of these new SEP 14 features I'm going to be talking about and tying that together with our new advanced threat protection solution, which I'll just be briefly touching on today. When you look at a lot of the little players out in the marketplace today, as John was talking about, there's a lot of them. You go to RSA, it'll be 500 booths of brand new vendors, all offering a little piece of functionality that is an area of interest or an area that our customers struggle with. And what I like to point out is with all of the layers that SEP is able to provide, we're one of the few vendors that can hit the entire cyber kill chain. or in this framework, you want to look at a solution that can detect these threats before it actually is able to take hold of the endpoint and the incursion phase. Certainly, you want to have a solution that can prevent it from actually installing itself on that endpoint, compromising it, and then laterally moving within your environment to compromise additional endpoints as it exfiltrates data within the organization. And so the last piece, which is really in that detection and response that John was talking about earlier, you also want a solution that's going to be able to help provide the remediation capabilities, right? So actually taking care of this threat. And what's nice about SEP 12 and in SEP 14, of course, you're able to do all of these things with a single product. And so when we look at the number of different vendors that are out in the marketplace today, there's really, in my opinion, 4 key areas that customers are trying to look for an endpoint agent to do. One is the anti-malware, the traditional security providers that most of our customers are familiar with. Some of the next-gen players that are coming into the marketplace today. Then you've got solutions that are really targeted at providing exploit prevention capabilities. These are even zero-day vulnerabilities. And then your detection and response, right? So how do I detect some of these advanced persistent threats that my anti-malware or my next-gen endpoint technologies didn't catch, bring it to my attention, and allow me to quickly remediate it, right? The benefit with SEP 14 is we do all 4 of those things with a single agent. And this is something that is almost like a disrupting technology, even though we don't think it's necessarily new. We've been doing this for a very long time. Maybe not necessarily marketing it as best as we could have. So I'm constantly educating customers. If you're not familiar with Symantec Advanced Threat Protection, I'm just going to briefly talk about it. SEP is really your prevention layer, right? And so it has capabilities. You look on the left there, we have an intrusion prevention system, we have reputation, we have behavioral analysis, we have a full-featured firewall that not only can you get centralized reporting on it, you get centralized management, something you don't get with the Windows-based firewall. You have the ability to isolate your endpoints and quarantine them. You've got privileged management capabilities. You've got application control. You've got device control capabilities. You have hardening capabilities against zero-day vulnerabilities and patches. And you've got the ability to do exploit mitigation for threats, even using a toolkit like Metasploit, right? Then on the ATP side, it's the ability to actually detect some of these advanced threats, prioritize them, correlate them against additional control points. So we're actually able to correlate across your existing SEP footprint, email security, network, roaming users, and soon DLP integration and our recent acquisition of Bluecoat in there as well, right? So one product to do all of this. And best of all, you're doing it with one agent, and that agent is your Symantec Endpoint Protection Agent, which most of our customers already has deployed. So if you just want to do ATP endpoint and start getting at this, you've already got the agent that can connect into that ATP platform and start doing these types of activities. So if you want to look for indicators of compromise out there in your environment, you have the ability to do that. That can be based on IP address, domain, registry key, file hash. Show me everyone in my organization, for example, that got a particular email, who's went to this particular website. You're able to quickly respond, isolate, and quarantine these machines, and then remediate them with a power eraser. And then more importantly, I want to prevent that threat from coming back in my environment time and time again. So you have the ability to do blacklisting right within that same product. So what I like to reference, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you've got one agent to rule them all. Not to spend a lot of time on marketing, but we've obviously have had for the last 14 consecutive years been the Gartner Leader Quadrant contender out there. Last year, AV-TEST gave us a perfect score for protection. We've outperformed some of these next-gen endpoint technologies. SE Labs for the last 14 straight quarters have been the only vendor to get AAA rating. We have 270,000 loyal customers. We're number 1 in market share. And with SEP 14 for my customers from Ford Motor Company on down, we're beta customers and contributing to the release of SEP 14 and testing it. If you want any of the information on third-party tests, I'll be happy to give it to you guys. But more importantly, what I'm always trying to do for our customers is enabling you to do your own studies, your own testing with these products. And we'll touch about that today. Please reach out to me. I'll tell you how to set up your own red lab, download real malware, and actually throw it against SEP 14 and making sure that you're properly configuring it and you're using all those layers of protection. So one of the other big things that really make SEP in general a great endpoint technology is that we're using what we consider the largest civilian global threat intelligence network in the world. It's something that Symantec doesn't market very well, but we've got 175 million endpoints out there. We're talking not just enterprise customers using SEP, but all of the Norton users, right, that are out there using Norton products, as well as our mobile users. With the recent acquisition of Blue Coat, they're also bringing to the table something that we didn't have a ton of threat intelligence on, which is URL based, because they're seeing all these URLs going through their proxy technology, which also is enhancing this gin that we've already had. What we did really well, which they didn't, was the file reputation, adding 30 million new files to Insight on a daily basis. So that directly feeds into some of these next generation features that some of the competitors are claiming, like artificial intelligence or machine learning. This is stuff that we've been doing for 8 years already, since the days of Malpure, for those that have been long-term SEP customers. We've got ability to consume billions of logs today for the customers who use our managed security services, and we're scanning approximately 1/4 of the world's email using Message Labs. So we see a lot of threats out there, particularly when you have a consumer product. On the Norton side, as we all know, end users on the consumer side typically don't have the greatest hygiene when it comes to protecting their boxes, and don't necessarily have the greatest security awareness skills when it comes to avoiding phishing attempts and downloading things that they probably shouldn't. This all directly feeds into SEP 14, and so if I leave you with something today, the 3 key areas we're really focused on is superior protection with SEP 14, high performance, we'll talk a little bit about how it's a better than SEP 12 today, and then the orchestrated response and ability to remediate with it. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on SEP 12, obviously, but a lot of customers, we have to continuously educate them to make them aware that some of the technologies or new companies out in the marketplace that they're gravitating toward, they already can do that with SEP 12 if they're taking advantage of it. So making sure that you're using all of these features today is incredibly important. If there's things in here that you don't recognize, you're not unsure of, please reach out to us. One of the things I'm offering up to all our customers and working with CBI is doing what I like to call a red flag assessment. This is a free assessment that I can provide, or any one of your Symantec account teams can do. And I validate that your existing SEP 12 environment is installed properly and you're taking advantage of these additional technologies in the product before we actually get you to SEP 14. So hence red flags. Is there anything in there that's concerning now in SEP 12 that we should talk about or remediate before you actually bring those same problems over into a brand new product? So within SEP 14, there's a couple of key areas, as John talked about, we're going to touch on. You can see in there new memory exploit mitigation. You may see, depending on different semantic material, it referenced in a different way. They finally, when we officially released it, they settled on MEM. But it had been referenced in other material and may still be out there referenced as GEM, generic exploit mitigation. But just so you know, and you're not confused, it's the same technology. Advanced machine learning is something that we're going to touch on today. But like I said before, we've been doing machine learning for a better part of 8 years with this product. We'll touch a little bit on some of the new capabilities that machine learning is bringing to the table to make SEP 14 not just faster, but a smaller footprint. A new emulator. This is a hypervisor running locally on the endpoint itself. It's extremely lightweight, no overhead to that endpoint. And this is really finding some of these more advanced polymorphic threats, particularly with encrypted packers. So these are the big things that we want to touch on today that are in the new release. I also like to talk about which I'm going to give you guys these decks. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but making sure customers understand where these various layers within SEP line up into the cyber kill chain. We're one of the only vendors to be able to do across the entire cyber kill chain too. And I want to highlight which features and functionality of those layers within SEP do just that. So with this next-gen file-based protection, we were talking about the funnel. We're going to continue to use Insight, which is our reputation, 30 million new files added to it daily. Sonar, which is our behavioral analysis engine. This is actually being able to detect threats in real time. This is a big differentiator for us. Competitors out there, sometimes only are able to try to, from a machine learning perspective, look and judge, is this a good or bad file? If they made the wrong call, once that file is executed, they don't have any real-time behavioral analysis to stop it. It's too late. And then after the fact, after the system's been compromised, there's no remediation tools there to take care of the threat. Symantek's the only one being able to do the detection before. You get that threat actually on the box during the actual time of execution of that threat. And if you miss that, the early detection of an advanced persistent threat, the ability to remediate and quarantine that asset all within that same endpoint agent. SDS is our static data scanner, or SDS engine. So this is where these new technologies are coming in. So the emulator VM for packed threat execution, SAFE, which is short for Sapien, which is our machine learning engine, ITCP, which is our new total cloud protection, which is vastly reducing the footprint for SEP 14 over SEP 12. And then brand new Core Depth 3 lightweight AV signatures. 1.5 is what we used prior in SEP 12. So why add a local emulator? Well, over time, from 2005 to current, you're getting to see more and more threats that are being packed. More importantly, they're hiding these threats with custom packers. Back in the day, there were very few packer technologies out there, and certainly they weren't being updated frequently. Versus today, this is a way that they can hide this malware. It's polymorphic, it can be encrypted in nature. And so this little local emulator is able to pick these threats up in real time before it's actually able to take hold and compromise your endpoint. So how it comes in the environment, you have a virtual environment running in there, which simulates the Windows client. We detonate it, we're searching for it, we're injecting a DLL within that, and picking then up based off of that DLL the processes that threat is actually trying to compromise the endpoint agent, and then go ahead and kill those particular processes from harming the endpoint. We're also using machine learning. Like I said, if you're familiar with machine learning, I'm happy to provide to customers that do have an NDA a deeper dive white paper on this. But we're using a Masonite forest with our model, which we think is extremely efficient. If you're familiar with machine learning, we're looking at about 153 active attributes on these files. This is where we're able to quickly diagnose is this a good or bad file with a very low false positive rate over our competitors. Cylance is one of the bigger vendors out there pitching machine learning. Trend is just adding that in their product as well. We are 150x on the average test against Cylance of having a false positive rate. They're typically coming in anywhere from 15 to 40% in false positive rate over Symantec. We're also with this machine learning, like I said, I've been doing it since 2008, where some of these companies have just sprung up since 2012. We are doing a model that is incredibly small, lightweight, doesn't add a lot of overhead to the endpoint. As an example, in comparison to Cylance, who has a 300 meg model on each of their endpoints, we have a 23 meg model, which we actually thought was too large until we looked at to some of the competitors out there. One thing in here too that I want to make sure is everyone should be contributing to the telemetry to SEP, both in 12 and in 14. If you're not familiar with telemetry, this is what helps feed the global intelligence network. It's anonymous data. Customers that are concerned, please reach out to us. I'm happy to share the reasons why and what data we send up there. We're doing telemetry, though, based on SEP, Norton products, mobile devices, DLP, now Blue Coat. So The goal is across the entire Symantec portfolio, we will be adding telemetry data to that global intelligence network. All right, so one of the things we're doing with our new cloud protection here is instead of pushing down these large content sets to your endpoint, I'm happy to report we're reducing network traffic by up to 70% in your environment. For a lot of my customers, we've actually seen customers either vastly reduce the number of GUPs, group update providers in their environment, or completely remove GUPs from their environment as a result. What we're doing is putting hashes or threats local to the endpoint that are more current. What are you more likely to see? What are some of the bigger threats out there that you would want on that endpoint locally? I don't really necessarily care about threat data for something that's 12 years old. That data still might be important. I still may encounter that threat, but that's something that we can end up doing a lookup on. One of the things that I typically get customers, what's that going to mean to me from a network lookup perspective? What's that going to add as overhead? And I'm happy to report it's less overhead than what you had within step 12 with the amount of content coming down to your endpoint. We're actually looking at an 84% reduction in disk space requirements as a result with step 14 over step 12, which I've got a couple slides on here to share with you. In here, just as an example, there's 3 different agents within step 14. Most of our customers are going to be running a hybrid agent, which we would consider almost a standard agent. This is basically a mix of having those most current desks local to the client, and then the rest of it being lookups through ITCS. The other client's more of a dark network client. This would be for environments like a manufacturing where they're completely segmented off, there's no network traffic, and then we're putting all that content local to that particular endpoint. And then you've got your embedded or VDI, so you need a lightweight, extremely lightweight agent on there, not a lot of disk space where we can do complete cloud lookups on there. So depending on your use cases and the different environments you may be installing step 14, you'll choose which agent, but I would guess most of our customers, 90% plus, you're going to be using standard hybrid agent. So we look at kind of disk space, estimated package size from network traffic with step 12 with Core F1 1.5 in comparison to step 14, which is under 45 meg. You can see that's a huge reduction. But also the estimated definition size on disk from 700 meg with step 12.1 to about 170 meg with the standard agent. You can see it even gets smaller when you start going with the VDI around 75. So vast reduction amount of disk space, which also means a lot less disk space required for your GUPs. And also you can start increasing best practice, at least 30 content revisions or more on your supplement infrastructure. What MEM would have been able to do is every threat that Symantec's aware of over the last 15 years that is memory-based, MEM would stop. And it's going to get more important as we add new features to this. These are capabilities that probably the closest competitors out there would be, of course, Microsoft's MET, which we've actually shown demonstrated attacks using Metasploit, where we can actually bypass Microsoft MET on an endpoint and still have MEM detect that threat. Other things like maybe Palo Alto's traps as an example, this would be a direct competitor as well. Once again, you don't have to go buy another technology. You can do it with the existing endpoint agent that you're already running on that box. So what we're going to provide you with is the ability to provide protection against, the common challenges that most of our customers face in the way of Java, Flash, your browser vulnerabilities, may it be Chrome, IE, or Firefox. Memory attacks that take advantage of C-hops or memory or heap spray attacks. This is by embedding malicious code into a PDF document or macros within an Office document. We're going to be able to draw up and detect these types of threats. This is particularly useful. Not only are we doing this in our endpoint technology, we're also doing this in our email security.cloud technology. And since email is the #1 attack vector, we can catch these threats before they actually ever get to your endpoint. But if you're not a customer, I highly recommend you talk to your rep or CBI about it. But if you're not, your endpoint's your last resort, right? So MEM is going to pick up some of these advanced persistent threats that are actually taking advantage of circumventing a lot of the email security technologies out there by embedding it into common documents like Word, Excel, and PDF that you're not going to start blocking, and typically they're not detecting those threats where they can actually even call out to another site to actually pull down an additional payload on that endpoint, actually open up a shell like PowerShell or CMD.exe, which a lot of your endpoint security technologies can't detect or stop either. So definitely a cool technology that you want to take advantage of. For those that are Mac customers today, real quick, we've extended out Mac capabilities within SEP 14 by adding device control. This isn't full feature device control that you're used to, hopefully that you're taking advantage of on the Windows side, but anything that is disk-based, meaning you can write data to or read data from, you can actually create your device control policy. So any removable drive, for example, or mobile device where you're going to write data to, you can actually create device control policies for. It isn't like Windows where you can actually create a device control, for example, to control what printers can be attached to a particular computer yet, just data. If you haven't taken advantage of this, reach out to me. I'm always trying to share with customers about device control. Many of my customers are just starting to create removable media policies out there and actually starting to look at removable media encryption. A couple of my customers have taken advantage of host integrity, which has been built also within SEP 12. That's the predecessor SNAC technology, Semantic Network Access Control, to actually be able to get a good understanding of what type of removable media devices are actually being plugged into their assets. That helps drive the creation of that policy. More importantly, if you weren't aware, you can actually create policies to show me what data is actually being written to those removable media devices, which also can help for a lot of our customers that are trying to get a DLP program or product in place to actually prevent that from happening. This also can push the need for the organization to take a look at encryption, to force encryption for those sensitive documents being written to those removable media types. So the other thing is, one thing Symantic's done really well is with any application we write for the Macintosh platform or OS X, it doesn't look like a Windows ported application over on the Mac, right? It looks, feels, and acts just like any other Mac application. So beyond device control, the ability to have notifications now show up on those OS X systems, you control that if you'd like. Some customers don't want any of those pop-ups to their end user, regardless of their Windows or Mac, but that's a new feature that we've added into the product. We've also added the ability that you can actually do a quick uninstall right from the OS X menu bar with SEP, if you allow that. So some of the new things within SEP 14, brand new UI and enhancements that have been added to the installation and configuration wizard. We're going to tell you about the importance of turning on that telemetry that I mentioned before multiple times. It's an all 64-bit environment now, so we only support 64-bit operating systems. You got 64-bit Java in here as well. So hopefully we don't have any customers still running on 32-bit OSs. If so, you need to get ported over to a supported 64-bit platform. By default now, we've also added TLS to the database. So between the Tomcat, we've now got TLS 1.2 on by default. There is a script on there if you, for whatever reason, wanted to turn off encryption. You could, although obviously it goes against best practice. We also do TLS for email. That was something for a lot of our SEP 12 customers. If they wanted to get email alerts and you happen to be, for example, an Office 365 customer, you can get those because 12 couldn't send it over TLS. We now support that in SEP 14. Natively also secure client to server communication with HTTPS is also a best practice. And you can retain your previous settings from SEP 12 onto 14. Another thing we've embedded is clean wipe into the delivery of SEP 14. So if you want to wipe out any previous versions and get a clean, fresh install SEP 14 on the box, you don't want to save any previous policies, we can definitely do that as well. This is likewise expanding out the removal of competing products. So if you want to install competitor products that might exist out in the environment, you're brand new to Symantec Endpoint protection, that's built in as well. Highly recommend for our customers to leverage auto upgrade if you can. Some customers still like delivering out through a systems management product, but we can certainly do the auto upgrade. So create your new SUP 14 package, make it available to your appropriate groups, and then when they check in, they'll see that a new version of the package exists, download it, auto upgrade it. During the reboot cycle, which you can schedule, you can allow your users to do, you can force them to do it, you can give them windows of time, however you decide to do it. Even some customers, that system won't reboot until they do a patch cycle. So you never lose protection. Once the system's rebooted, they're automatically upgraded on SUP 14. So same thing for Mac clients as well, auto upgrade there as well. Another nice thing is within SUP 14 and the SUPM, the ability to look at some of the new reports on these new threats, go look up from Virus Total if anyone else is seeing this threat, quickly take action on that particular threat. We'll talk about that within ATP hopefully here real quick. I'll show you some of that stuff. Look at the hash of that particular threat right in the SUP console. Another new feature in here that I know a lot of customers like, if you had a problem actually getting diagnostic logs off of an endpoint from the SUP console. We're also trying to alert customers of new features and functionality or vulnerabilities with our product. So I'll show you when you log into the console, each user that uses the SUP console, you'll actually see an alert that there's something new that we want to share with you. That's unique to each individual that logs into the console. So one person does it, everyone else doesn't miss out on those threats. We're also trying to make changes too within our knowledge base. So you can subscribe, RSS feed, tell me when there's an update to this article. So that's going to continue to build out as well. So customers are always asking, how do I get notified when certain things happen? If a new version of SEP is available, or we got a depth problem, or Symantec had a vulnerability issue, I want to know about it. I want to find about it later. This is going to address that. So brand new reports, very similar to SEP 12. You can kind of customize your SEPM homepage with what your favorite reports are. And that was just a quick shot there to show you the hash type application hash for files that show up in the SEPM console and in your reports. Also, we are dropping off, thank God, SEP 11. So if you have SEP 11 clients out there, you definitely need to get rid of them. One way or another. For most of my customers that can't, I highly recommend looking at DCS, which is Data Center Security, which was formerly known as Critical System Protection, particularly designed to hardened legacy platforms that you can't find a security technology to run on any longer. Otherwise, we will support 12 going forward. So just like other previous products, you got backwards compatibility with your SEPMs. So you can have SEP 12 clients reporting into a SEPM that's running 14. So those are that product notifications I was talking about earlier. I jumped a little bit ahead on the slide. So you get those additional alerts right in the console, latest news, and the KB articles and TechNet articles. Also, we've added new exceptions. So prefixes, for example, for the system drive, or customers might have C drive, just OS. You don't necessarily need to scan that. That's locked down. What I care about is doing my scheduled scans like on the D drive or E drive where you got applications loaded or end user data. So we support that new prefix, as well as new exception prefixes for user profile as well, particularly potentially useful for some of your virtual environments like VMware Horizon or Citrix as an example. Same thing for user profile scanning. So that's all available in there when you set up your actual scan policies. Another new thing is we've added GUP Supernetting for those that are going to continue to use GUPs. You don't have to add in a couple hundred subnet ranges, right? So you can just add, you got 192.168.0.0, that's all you need to add in. You don't have to do 192.168.1.2.3, keep adding on, so and so forth, right? So vastly reducing the amount of time as an administrator you got to do that. Reduction of bandwidth and replication scheduling, so you can actually schedule now replication between your various SEPMs and or your sites. Also particularly useful, so you can avoid any overhead when other things like backups are occurring within your environment on those particular windows or days. We've expanded out the REST APIs, so you can integrate SEP within other security products through like even workflow automation. So the REST APIs in SEP 14 that we've added, log in, log out of the SEPM, maintaining list of groups, assigning file fingerprint lists to groups for system lockdown, which is available in 12. Highly recommend you take advantage of that for your legacy Windows XP systems, for example, or 2003. retrieve Symantec Endpoint version information and or add or delete files from the fingerprint list or add it to a blacklist. All right, another thing that's in here is, to get close to time, is EDR. So SUP 14 actually has a full featured EDR, which we may call when it's officially released here with ATP Endpoint Live Response. What this is full capability is very similar to like Carbon Black. So capturing everything that from an activity standpoint that's happening on an endpoint. So what files got created, what registry keys got created, what port did it communicate on, what IP address did it communicate on. This is all going to tie into the other control point technologies that ATP already offers today. So I can provide you visibility on who got that email, who executed that file, did that file create particular registry keys, did it communicate outbound on a particular port to a particular IP site? What does deep site say about that IP or domain name? What reputation information does Symantec have about that site that it's communicating to? You can look for any of this stuff as an indicator of compromise across all your endpoints. Likewise, competitor there, as an example, is Tanium. So anything on any of your endpoints, I can search for, just like Tanium. If it's any executable file, that today comes back instantly. So I get the results, and what's nice about that is I get the results for machines regardless if they're on my network or not. I don't have to worry about them being connected to VPN. Like a lot of competitors, they also don't have the ability to provide you visibility to machines that are not connected to the network or not on VPN. So we have an ATP roaming capability to provide you with those capabilities as well. It's all using that SUP 14 agent. So current supplement EDR functions today, authenticate, isolate, which is using your host integrity to quarantine the system off. Just give you an example. If I had a threat, maybe it's a ransomware, one of the first things I'm going to do is isolate that endpoint. I don't want it to have communication capabilities to other network shares in my environment. I'm going to cut it off at the knees. I maintain communication with my supplement environment, my ATP solution, maybe my forensic systems, but I don't want it talking to anything else in the environment. All configurable, all controlled by that same endpoint agent. You can delete files, get files off of the endpoint. You can actually look for any of those evidence of compromise or IOCs, and you can prevent those threats from reoccurring by doing blacklisting all through that same interface. Today, one of the things you can do is do real-time searches on endpoints. It uses the SUP heartbeat, so depending on what that is, for some customers it might be 20 minutes to 40 minutes. I want to let you know that's already built into also SUP 14 is what we call SPOC, single point of contact. This will allow our ATP solution and endpoint technologies to bypass heartbeat, to have anything occur on that endpoint in real time. That's going to be highly useful. And this also allows now today our ATP platform to directly talk to a SUP client. It does not have to go through the supplement infrastructure. When you are rolling out SUP 14 with ATP, there's an EDR enrollment. We got a shared private and public key that gets exchanged there. And we've got new workflow capabilities being added in there to do auto, whatever it might be. Like a good example of this might be any suspicious file that ATP picks up, automatically send it up to our Cynic, our dynamic malware analysis service, detonate it, come back with a verdict on it, and then based on that verdict, what do I want to do? And I already made mention of the flight data recorder, which may be called live response. Where I'm going to particularly find useful here is once we get it further integrated within Bluecoat. SUP, by the way, is already integrated in less than 30 days after the acquisition. Bluecoat proxies are already integrated in with the SUP infrastructure. We're going to expand that live response capability where Bluecoat does the full reporting of network activity, correlate that to what we see on the endpoint as part of flight data recording. Other just enhancements, IP Route 2 support's been added. Java's no longer required, thank God. And we've added the ability with precompiled binary support for additional flavors of Red Hat. If you have not looked into or taken advantage of endpoint protection on Linux, I highly recommend you do so. We made that a lot easier where customers don't have to compile their own kernels and download and install GCC on your endpoints. We've got that built into the product. If you're a Veritas customer, just simply from the split, we've added a new certificate so we can do Veritas auto exclusion since we're two separate companies now. All this means is if there happens to be a threat in backup, we don't try to go scan into that backup and repair it, which then would corrupt your backups. End of life, XP and 2009 going end of life. So if you have those platforms out there, 12.1, 6 MP3 will be kind of your last version of the product to support that, which, like I said, can still talk to SEP 14. SQL 2005 and 2008 R2, SP1, and SP2 are also dropped off. So most of our customers are on SEP 14 on either 2012 R2 or 14, and likewise upgrading SQL to 2012 on up. V6 been dropped off. We still support network shared insight cache. If you're not familiar with what that technology is, reach out to us. Basically, we have a whole best practice guide for virtual environments to reduce up to 80% of your I/O overhead and your VMware environment. You can do that in 12, but it's also carried forward on 14. So we're going to continue to keep doing that. More importantly, we've got SEP for VDI, which goes into our data center security portfolio. So if you've got issues today with SEP running in a virtual infrastructure, or you're only running AV on servers or VMware boxes, you got to reach out to us. We'll tell you how you can turn on things like IDS, IPS in that virtual infrastructure with no overhead. I think I covered everything. 64-bit Sybase database for embedded. I have to choose that route. Most people go on SQL. And then I already made mention Java 8. I want to show you guys some quick examples. We were talking about MEM. This is something I try to help customers. If you're not familiar with VirusTotal, you can go out there, you can set up your own account and get access to intelligence. I'll help you guys create the queries to actually pull down live malware. You can actually say, pull down live malware that McAfee missed, Kaspersky missed, Sophos missed, whoever participates in VirusTotal, and then pull those files down and actually throw it against that 14 to test it. And this is what we do all the time when we were going through the beta. So I'm actually looking for memory attacks that are embedded into PDF documents here in shellcode. This is a PDF document that actually is using a heap spray attack, for example. So we just downloaded it right from VirusTotal, change it to the appropriate extension as a PDF. If you scan it, which is what's going on there, SEP doesn't find anything. Once again, AV, hash, as John may mention, provides limited protection. So when I real-time execute it, though, you can see that Symantec Endpoint Protection popped up there. That's them saying that there is a memory heap spray attack detected and killed that process before it did anything harmful to the endpoint. Also, if it tried to open up a PowerShell or open up a cmd.exe window, we'd likewise detect that process. That can also be further controlled with application control solution to prevent that happening, but MEM's directly blocking that particular exploit. So pretty cool. Other things I'd like to show you guys, like I said, I need an NDA in place. Hopefully I didn't kill you guys with information by running through it too quick. As you can see, there's a lot within SEP 14, a lot that we can talk about. I would be more than happy to work with CBI and whoever your appropriate account team is at Symantec to give you guys a deeper dive into ATP with SEP 14 as well.
Thanks a lot, Scott. That's a ton of information, as you can tell in Scott's voice and maybe mine, but we're really, really excited about the new features, the new functionality coming with SEP 14 and really being able to turn a lot of what was already there in 12 back on. I've got a couple of questions queued up, so Scott, I'll throw these questions back at you and see if we can't run through them. You mentioned real quickly about the 64-bit machines and the increased and how the entire stack is now running 64-bit. Can you just clarify that a little bit? There was a question about that.
Yeah, so all that means is for 64-bit, particularly on the SEPM side, SEP will only run on a 64-bit operating system, so that's going to be your newer OS. As I said, most of our customers are standardizing on 2012 R2 or above. Likewise, the components of SEP have been updated. So if you're a smaller customer and you're using the embedded database, that's been upgraded to a 64-bit database. That's why you also need a 64-bit OS. Java is also 64-bit now as well. From a client perspective, we still support obviously 32-bit and 64-bit clients. No problem there, regardless of flavor as well. So Mac, Linux, and Windows. Hopefully that clarifies.
Yep. On the virtual side, you mentioned it that there was now SEP for I think it was SEP for VDI. Yep. Can you talk about moving a lot of that protection up to the hypervisor level? What that would mean if I was running a virtual desktop environment?
Yeah, so there is a best practice guide for SEP for VDI, or SEP in general that, if you haven't seen, happy to provide. There's a number of tools, both in SEP 12 and SEP 14, you can take advantage of, but particularly what we offered up to customers, and if you're interested, like I said, reach out to us. You can trade in a portion of your licenses of SEP for SEP for VDI, 1-to-1 ratio there. And then what we're doing is on each of the ESXi boxes, we're running a virtual security appliance on there, which kind of goes into DCS. What we're providing is to be able to do agentless AV. Unlike other companies that claim they do agentless AV, and then you still have to install a shim into each box, using VMware tools. This is true native with VMware. So we can do 100%, no install on any of those endpoint guest OSs and do agentless AV. If you want to go beyond that, we also have the ability of doing agentless IPS, which is also a big differentiator for us because we talked about AV is not going to catch much, right? It's starting to get an improvement into the intrusion detection and prevention capabilities, and we do that as well. And if you happen to be a Palo Alto customer, we can actually integrate that with Palo Alto's Panorama as well. So basically what that means is you're running a virtual security appliance on each of your ESXi hosts, and we're using native VMware integration, so you don't have to actually have a shim installed in there to provide that type of protection. You can use tools that come with SEP 12 and SEP 14. One of them's the VMware Exclusion tool that you will basically vet out that all the files or your VMware images are actually gold. There is no infection, there's no malware in it. And then we create a hash of all those files, so we don't have to keep scanning those files over and over again because nothing's changed, right? This does the reduced I/O within your virtual infrastructure up to 80%. The other thing you can do too is you can set up schedules, so you can do download randomization and scan randomization within your virtual infrastructure. So I don't have on an ESX host that has 60 guests, as an example, all 60 getting scanned at the exact same time, or all 60 of them getting brand new content at the exact same time. I'm scheduling that out or randomizing it so that only a few are, so you don't kill your ESXi host and all of the other things that box may be doing. Hopefully that answers that.
So the answer is yes. There's definitely advantages with SEP for VDI. It's definitely been built specifically in many cases to support virtual infrastructure. I really want to thank everyone for joining us today, for hearing about the power of the new SEP 14, about CBI's managed SEP offering. If you want to get more information about SEP 14, if you want to get more information about how we can manage it for you, or if you just want to talk with one of our security strategists, please reach out to us at help@cbihome.com or on the telephone number that's listed there on the screen. Thank you again, everyone, for joining, and have a great day.